Well, welcome everyone. Welcome out to Kitchen Table TCG, and welcome to Brian, the professor from Tolarian Community College. Dude, it is an honor. Thank you so much for. I said this before, and you said, "I hope you don't see it like this," but thank you so much for taking some time for the smaller content. It says a lot about your character to take the time out of your schedule to care about those of us who are still up and coming in the YouTube sphere.
Well, I really appreciate you having me. And like I also said to you, I was just really excited at you extending the offer. And I'm thrilled to be here today to talk some flesh and blood, which is something we're both very passionate about. And I can't wait. Let's do it.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much. And I've got some questions from myself that I'm really interested in. I don't want this to just be questions to you, but I figure that's a great way to start the dialogue, and we can just kind of banter back and forth about different things. And then I also have my Discord server has a bunch of questions for you. They're pretty good, I gotta say. They're Brian from Tolarian Community College questions. I know.
All right.
I've heard you ask questions before, and I assume that you are comfortable answering those tough questions. Then
very comfortable, and I've got and when we get to the end, I've got a tough one for you to close.
I love it. Hey man, you chime in anytime we got questions in the dialogue. Let's hop in some. All right, my big question for you, and this was, I wanted to start off with just like, I didn't want to beat around the bush for this one, is like, what does Legend Story Studios have to do to keep Brian from Community College, Tolarian Community College, interested in Flesh and Blood, and not just your YouTube channel, but you as a player, as a collector of cardboard games, and what do they have to do to keep you interested in this game that we're all playing?
They need to not mess up the game. That's what they need to do. I mean, that's they're doing it now because I'm interested and there now. They need to not mess it up, and that's a difficult thing to do. You see, sometimes it's very easy over on my channel to kind of sit and laugh at Wizards of the Coast and all the decisions they make that we see as foolish or wrong. But it's hard not to make mistakes when you're dealing with a giant behemoth that already Flesh and Blood is. And there's so many factors out of your control. Like, for example, the shipping that has occurred due to not only COVID, but we just had a giant tanker stuck in a canal that affected where some of the new Monarch product was going to get to shelves on time. And that's not on the company's fault or to blame, but they have to deal with it. There's so many factors, but I would say they have to not mess it up. And that's a little vague. It's a balance between collectability, which is important. And I think that that's actually one of the biggest things Flesh and Blood has in its corner early on, is that collectors are very interested, investors are interested, and that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing, but it can be a double-edged sword, which is that we also need to just have that element of, this is a fun game, and we need casuals who want to just jam games, get games, maybe start seeing what competitive play is like, go down to their local game stores for some events. Ooh, there's a big 1K, 10K going on. Maybe I'll get good enough to try my seat in that. And that needs to grow as well. And that's the area that it needs more attention with Flesh and Blood. If I hear one more viewer say to me, wah, something about like investors, and it's like, come on, this is a game too. There's a great game behind this, and that's important, and that's going to be their big challenge, I think, in the next year.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we've talked a lot about. I've talked to George from Compete Sports, who's one of the bigger LGSs that's involved in the community, and we've talked about the idea that a lot of people gravitate towards the success of Flesh and Blood as a collectible game. But the reason that it's collectible is because the people who started collecting it loved playing it, and it kind of transitioned over, and that's one of the biggest ways that it turned into a collectible, because you love the things that you collect, and you collect the things that you love. And so because the gameplay was so tight and so fun and so interesting, and it brought a lot of people back to early Magic the Gathering of like really interactive, right? Like really interactive gameplay. Not just like I saw an arena. I don't want to just bash Magic the Gathering, but I saw an arena shot today from a friend who had like, he did 450 damage in one turn, and it's like, that is not the intention of original Magic the Gathering to just be able to win in one turn, like with, you know. And I love that the interaction of the gameplay. So I totally agree, man. Like I think the gameplay has to come first. Now the other stuff, I would push back a little bit with you, like the supply issues. I think right now you can still readily get unlimited, like on the open market, like, you know, from distributors. Stores can't get it. I'm talking about WTR, or Welcome to Wraith, and Arcane Rising. But to me, like the fact that you can still get a booster box that's been out for 6 months for $100 on eBay, to me says that like they printed enough at that background, and hopefully we see that continue in Monarch, where like we just have an overabundance of unlimited. I think that's what people forget in the comment section, is that unlimited exists, and they just see these huge prices and they get scared.
I also think that outsiders look at it, and in many ways, if I can make a Magic example, it's kind of like looking at Magic and then saying, oh, this is too expensive. Do you know what a box of alpha costs? How am I supposed to get into Magic the Gathering? And I hear that where it's this sentiment where people are obsessed with the literal first printing of Flesh and Blood and what those boxes are going for. And it's like, that is not indicative of what you need to spend to get into the game. Some people really lucked out in investing in that early on, and then, you know, kudos to them. But you're absolutely right that unlimited is what the casual player should be looking at. It's a different concept to maybe wrap your head around, I suppose. But I think that is a great thing that packs are what they are, even for the older sets. And with the new sets, I do want to keep an eye on what happens with these blitz decks, as that's something that you don't want these blitz decks to be $100 on eBay, and that's the only way to get a hold of one. That really defeats their purpose, and that's a challenge as well. Because I've got my video coming out on maybe it'll be up by the time this interview goes up. But spoilers, I love the blitz decks. I think they're the perfect way to say to someone who's just like, where do I start? And it's just like, you know what? Here, grab a blitz deck, grab a second for your friend or your sibling or something, and there you go. And you can go from there. And you don't want that entry point to be $100 a pop, because then that's not an entry point.
Yeah, they're reminiscent of like dual decks, right? Like my friends, like we would love when the new dual deck came out. We could come pick it up, play at the kitchen table. It wasn't competitive. It was just about hanging out and playing, and it was fun. They were, you know, they're made to be played against each other, and you can still pick those up for like $15 on, you know, the open market, $15-$20. So I like that. And I love that I do as well. I love that they've come out and said like, hey, we are going to reprint these.
Yes.
That is so important, because like, even if it takes them 6 months to reprint them and get them through the processing, that keeps the investors. I mean, I had people calling LGSs that have reported to me, calling to order 40 cases of blitz decks, like 40. It's like, why? Like, what are you doing? And they were like, why would you do that? So that prevents those people from doing that, which is great. So yeah.
That's and that goes back to my point of what do they need to do, not screw up. They're doing everything right so far. I mean, I'm pretty impressed with what I see. Things like that announcement that they're going to keep printing the blitz decks is like fantastic, and their timing of it to before people could go and muck things up in terms of pricing. It was just great. It's they're doing things really smart.
Yeah. It's almost as if if James White has a lot of TCG experience and 25, 30 years of working in the marketplace, but you know, it's a new game. It's just a bubble, right? So this is another. This is less about Flesh and Blood. I'm curious. I've watched your channel quite a bit. I watch you and I watch Rudy, and I see clearly, you know, where you guys get your polarized, you know, whatever from. I want to know from you, from the source, like what one of the things I talk about on my channel is investing, but also like investing in things that give you joy. So like when you purchase something, you know, maybe like I buy play mats. Like I'm collecting all the Flesh and Blood play mats because they give me joy. It's fun to put them on the video and whatever. So I'm curious, like what gives you like what brings you joy in a collectible card game or in a TCG, outside of obviously, you know, playing the individual game? Like is it playing with your friends? Is it doing YouTube content? Like what brings you the most joy in a trading card game?
I think it's playing at the local game store. My memories, when you speak like that, I've got a binder of absolutely worthless cards financially, but they're my most prized cards because each one of them, if I looked at it, I could point and tell you a story behind it. Because that was the card that was in my deck that won my first Friday Night Magic. That was the card that was in my deck when I met someone who's now my best friend, and that was my commander for that, and it's a 20-cent commander, but that was the deck that I first met them with, and I collect those. I have decks. I don't even just have cards. I have my favorite standard deck of all time, sleeved up and in a box. It was every Friday I was down at the game store for the entire season that deck was legal, and I have my wife's deck that she brought with her, and those two things I will have on my deathbed. I might get to be 89 and time to sell everything so there's money for my kid or something, but those two things were Magic the Gathering to me. And so I ascribe a lot of memories to cards. I've got a lot of white border third edition cards that aren't valuable, but that were from when I was in high school and started playing, things that I had imagination with and stories that I told in my head about and were on the playground. And so when you can ascribe that memory to the card through the gameplay, that to me is what really gives me joy. And for me, I really have always loved just hopping in the car and rolling down to my local game store. I love the gamer den, if that translates, a lot, where it's that smaller sort of store where the owner is the guy behind the counter, and they're there. They opened it because they just love to play, and they just reached the point where they're there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, my old LGS before the move, the owner would just always have decks behind the counter. You could walk up, and if he was on downtime, he just loved to just play with you, and it was good times. Good times. You meet people, you make friends through it, and that's really where I get my joy. And that's always why I've been a big proponent of the local game store, and why I always try and remind when people start to say casual and kitchen table is what's more important. I go, no, I really think that coming together and that shared social experience is so critical, and that's what gives me my joy.
Yeah. I love what you're saying is, you talked about like the white border cards, you talked about all those specific things that are in the deck. You talked about your standard deck, but what you related all those back to is like playing against your wife, or playing. I think you mentioned the playground. Like it's all these connections of actual people too, and that's man, I feel the same way. Like I remember playing. Sometimes I get in my car and a song will come on. It'll be a song that like was on when me and my friends were driving to Alliance, Ohio to play at our local game store in college. And we all packed, like 6 guys packed into this like tiny white, just regular little car, like, 1999 Hyundai. I don't know what it was. It's just like that memory, brings me back to like, that's what this was about. Like it was during Gate Crash. The set wasn't even that good. And like, it was just like the memory of being together. And
right.
And I miss that. Like I do.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Cool. So do you think then, like as somebody who's a proponent of the local game store, is there room in a local game store for two communities, a Magic the Gathering community and a Flesh and Blood community? Do you think that there's room for those two things to really coexist, or do you think that they compete with each other and difficult for them to coexist within the same local store?
I think there's plenty of room. I mean, already, I know we've just gone through the year of hell and everything, but if you think back to the before times, already at your local game store, and again, I'm not talking about obviously places like Mock Sporting House out here are these giant operations where it's a huge play space. But like I said, I love those little gamer dens. And you think of your local gamer den, you go to their website, it looks like it's on GeoCities or whatever, and you click on calendar, and you're going to see every day is full on that calendar with an activity going on, but it's a different thing. And it's like we got Warhammer Tuesdays, and then Wednesday it's I don't know if it died out, but at my local game store, the Star Wars X-Wing game was really popular for a minute, and that was taking up a couple nights. That was a good one. Magic the Gathering obviously is filling up a lot of days there, because you got Friday Night Magic, but then you got Legacy Sundays and all this stuff going on. But there's room for, then there's board game night, there's tabletop night. Come on in, grab Lords of Waterdeep or Ticket to Ride, and grab a couple people, and they'll sit down. Open play night and all this stuff. There's space. That is the local game store, and it's healthy too, because you maybe get sick of Standard, and then you walk over and you play some X-Wing or whatever, or you I just always enjoyed, I never got into Warhammer. I'd always just poke my little nose around and be like, what are you y'all up to over here? What do you do? It's so different and interesting.
They're painting their figures.
They're setting up these big terrains. They'd come in with these giant suitcases of wood and grass and set up this thing, and I was just mesmerized by it. It's cool.
You've played 7 games of Commander, and they're still setting up their terrain and painting their figure.
When do you ever play? I've never yet seen a game play. I've only seen the setup, and it's just like, well, good luck. I hope y'all have a good time. It looks fantastic. But yeah, I think there's plenty of room.
Good. I think so too. I think the only concern I have is anytime I ask my Magic the Gathering friends to play Flesh and Blood, they say this phrase, and I'd love to know your answer. I'd love to know your answer to this phrase. Say? I don't have the money to invest in another card game, or I don't have the time to invest in another card game.
Sure.
And that irks me. I mean, it bothers me, because I think if people would give, I think for Flesh and Blood specifically, if people would give it the time, you would understand that it's easy to learn. It doesn't require this whole, there's not, I think a lot of Magic the Gathering players think of like, okay, there's a billion sets because the game's been around since 1992, and like that's the daunting task of like learning all the cards. And like you play Commander, and like you have your own meta of like 600-700 cards that's probably in your friends' decks. Whereas like Flesh and Blood, it's new enough that it's like you can learn the whole meta in a day. Like you can learn everything about it all kind of in a day. And then it's it's deep. Like you can learn it easily, but then it's really deep to like figure out how to, like, I still haven't figured out how to win or how to play. I figured out how to have fun losing, but
right.
Like, I haven't figured out how to win or how to play good.
If you succeed, tell me how.
I will probably not ever succeed, but I've actually gravitated to stopping. I stopped trying to learn how to win, and instead I'm just going to host a Kitchen Table TCG competitive team that's going to learn how to win, and then I'll just report on their winnings.
There you go.
Instead of trying to win myself.
There you go. I think that's a fair thing. For me, I do think a lot of it is headspace. And as I get older and my capacity to store things in memory diminishes, I must admit there's that moment where you sit down, especially with a new game, and this isn't necessarily just Flesh and Blood, it's any new game, and you just look at it and you're like, oh my God, I don't have the headspace to wrap around all of this stuff. But the truth is that you do. And by the after getting a few games, once you get those few games, that goes a long way. And that's what I've learned as a trick, as somebody who plays a lot of new games. And I'm not particularly intuitive. I'm not one of those types where if I'm at like a place like, Gen Con and it's a new game, and you see these people who are like, I've got it. You do A, B, C, D, and they just figure it out. I'm the opposite. I say, I'm going to sit down and you're going to yell at me what I'm supposed to be doing. And after I've done it and you've forced me to put the pieces where they need to go, then it starts to click in my head. And that's when I start to understand it. And I would just say to anybody playing Magic at the local game store that you don't go about it as trying to sell it to them as a new lifestyle. What you say is, you want to see what a blitz deck is like? That's how I got into Commander. I remember people pulling out these 100-card decks after Friday Night Magic. And I said, oh my God, that was the weirdest thing in the world to me. 100-card deck. And I said, how do you shuffle those? And they said, do you want to find out? And I swear to God. And this is a stranger, mind you, a stranger. And he says, do you want to find out? And he just goes like this. And I was like, oh. And I thought I was just practicing shuffling. And he's like, draw set, let's do it. And suddenly I was in a game of Commander. And that's exactly how you want to do it with Flesh and Blood, which is just like, as soon as anybody's eyeball rolls on over, you just pull out that blitz deck And that's why, again, I feel they're so important. You just go, here, check it out. Let jam a game.
Yeah.
You're not saying buy anything. You're not saying do anything and stuff. And then when they see how cheap those blitz decks are, and when you explain to them the system, and you're all, yeah, that's the cool thing. So it's the equivalent of like there's some old original Innistrad packs, but they're still $4 each. But but they're the equivalent of being white border. Picture that. You pitch it to them in their terms. You say, would you love to buy original Innistrad packs if they were still $4 and they were white border instead of black, and they were right there behind the counter where the Innistrad packs are for $90 or whatever they are now.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's their system. Like that's their system. It's pretty clever. And you start getting them interested, and you're like, but yeah, $10, $15, pick up a blitz deck. Which one do you like? Do you like the look of this one? They're all pretty balanced. So you just go with the style you like.
Yeah.
You can get them in that way. And you just don't want to start going into the whole, oh, well, if you open this sort of thing, that's this $50 card. Like that comes later. That comes later when they open a $4 pack and you go, oh, snap. Do you realize what you just opened?
Yeah.
And then you've got them for life.
Yeah. That's a good point. And you're highlighting again, like the importance of the local game store, because that can only really happen there. And on Kitchen Table TCG, I historically play a lot of games with my friends because there was no local stores really around me for a while. But I love the idea of like just being able to pick that deck up for $15. So I'm curious how long, and I know everyone in the comment section is going to say it's impossible to keep everything in print forever, blah, 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 blah. I get it. But how long would you like to see like unlimited WTR, unlimited Arcane Rising?
Yeah.
Like what's the time frame for you? Like what's a cutoff where it's like, okay, this is an acceptable point for them to no longer have this readily available at a local game store?
So long as we are still doing the equivalent of Magic the Gathering Legacy, as in these cards are all still legal to play with, they will need to eventually, as things compound and grow on themselves, come up with the equivalent of like a core set that will have the needed cards in them, because you obviously can't have a system where there are staple cards that are no longer obtainable in packs. So unless they start coming up with a kind of rotation, which I doubt is going to happen, then what they'll need to do is they'll need to say, so you're going to see these cards appear in this type of a set, which will come out and will be available, so that when someone's saying, I need this card, and it's in one of these old sets, it's like, well, yes, but it's also in the core set that you can get, or it's been reprinted somehow. Access needs to happen in some form. As for when we hit that critical point, we're not at it yet. It's going to come up. I don't think that's this year's challenge. I think that's going to be in the next 2 to 3 years that'll rear its head, where if this game is going as strong as it is now, let alone stronger, and the demand is continuing to increase exponentially, especially as casuals get in and people are looking for game pieces for the game, and that's going to put a big stress on things, which is a good stress. You want that stress. That's when they're going to have to answer that stress with, okay, what's the solution? And here we come back to the original point. Hopefully, LSS doesn't, mess it up. What the answer is, people paid far more than me and far smarter than me will have to figure out, what are we going to do? Is it that we're going to have a core set, which is, I gravitate towards that you're going to have this idea of a base set. And it's the base cards. And it's like when you say, all right, this is a base card, and you got to determine what are the base cards that you need to be able to do that, versus cards that it's like, oh, that was a cool card, but you don't need it. And it can be a collector's piece that isn't available anymore. But things like, okay, that's a critical card. You need it to play the game. That goes in the base set. Maybe that's just what I'd lean towards. Certainly more than I'm not a fan of rotation in general. I wouldn't say, oh, you got to rotate. I think there's ways around that. Maybe eventually, maybe as an alternative. I mean, obviously, there's already many ways to play with Classic Constructed and Draft and all that such. So we'll see. But I don't think that's an immediate problem. So far, they're handling it well. 2 to 3 years is my bet, is when we'll need a solution.
I just hope they never say, my personal hope is like, never say that Unlimited is out of print.
Right.
Like, you don't have to print WTR every year.
Right.
Just never say that you can't pre-print it. If you reserve the right to reprint it in 5 years when you get some more space at the, and then you print it,
Yeah.
and it drives the prices down so that nobody's anyway. um
I think that would be. I feel like when I picture that in my mind, it seems impossible, and yet it's very tantalizing. Imagine if they pulled that off. Imagine
yeah,
if literally at your game store, again going back to Magic, it was the equivalent of, oh yeah, we just got a new shipment in of Mercadian Masks white border.
yeah,
And it's like they're $4 a pack,
and
and
you
it's
can
like
draft
that.
some like old thing that's like super
Yeah,
fun, and like
can
the
you
nostalgia
imagine
for
that?
the nostalgia for the early players, right? In 5 years, when we have 50 times the amount of players as right now, the nostalgia for you and I as early adopters of the game, and then for the new players at that time to come back and be like, oh, that's what you guys were talking about in that draft format or in that sealed format, and like
Yeah.
that could be cool.
Listen, I love your solution more than mine. I'm going to say that right now. I'd rather your
It's probably
solution
more
be what
difficult.
happens. Yeah, I don't know, but I don't claim to know these things. Like you said, they have the 25 years of game
Yeah,
experience
that's
and
true.
know all of these distributor and printing press stuff. I don't know that. I'm just the consumer. I'm just give me a pack,
Yeah,
and I
take my
don't
money.
want to take my money and don't take too much of it. That's where I'm coming from.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit more about that non-rotating format. So, you historically, I think, legacy and Pauper, is that your kind of main jam?
Modern was my real first love. I
Okay,
like Legacy. It struggles because of the reserve list. Modern has always been what I put my heart and soul into. Pauper came about because nobody could play Modern, and so
yeah,
I just ran into this wall of. I was just literally. I remember we were trying to hustle up 6 people on Saturday morning for Modern, and we couldn't always hustle up 6 people because nobody could afford Modern. And so I would make extra decks to give out and lend out, and we sometimes would get 8 people. What a thing, 8 people
ooh,
for
fun.
Modern. And Pauper came about where I was just sick of $1,000 mana bases, and it's like, all right, here's $50, you put a full deck together. And so that's why Modern and Pauper were really my jam. Legacy's fun. I always have a blast when I play it. The Legacy community, they've got real passion because they understand that struggle to get 6 people down at the game store to get a Legacy event to fire. Depending on the area, every area is different. And so
Right.
they're people who lend out decks and encourage budget builds, and proxying is okay. I love Legacy, but my real love is Modern, and second love is Pauper.
So in Flesh and Blood, it is all legacy. It's all
Right.
historic card pool, everything you want to do. And then they have this thing called they retire, or they the wall of forget, I should know this, but I don't. They retire the hero. So if a hero wins 10 events at the kind of top level of gameplay, then the hero is put on the wall of fame, I think it is, or something like that.
Right.
And it's retired, but the class still stays. So you
Right.
lose out on Dorinthia. You can no longer play Dorinthia, but you can still use all of your warrior cards. And
Right.
Dorinthia, there's only promos that are expensive. There's only the cold foil, whatever, but all of your other warrior cards are still there. What do you think? Is that a win? Is that
It's damn clever. I'll tell
yeah,
you, that was one of the things. The first thing that sparked me with Flesh and Blood, because I get a lot. Obviously, every day, everyone's like, check out this game, check out this game, check out this game. I hear a lot of it. I make lists, but the first thing that got my interest with Flesh and Blood more than anything was the way they handle the unlimited printing. And I said that's something that really got my interest. And then the second thing was what you described, where I thought that's clever as well. Because again, I hate rotation in Magic the Gathering, obviously. I hate the idea that my deck has an expiration date on it. And I thought
yeah,
that's clever. The hero maybe has an expiration date, and only if they end up winning too much.
right.
But then my cards don't expire. Just that it's a cool little thing. It leaves the door open where after a certain amount of time, who knows? I like that system a lot, and it's what got me looking at this company as doing things differently. And I love clever. I've always been very attracted to clever, and I thought that's clever. That's
Yeah,
very clever. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that. Big fan.
because it does
They
two
need more
things.
though, but they need one of the
Yeah,
things I feel I want to see is I want a lot of choices. I want to say to you, oh, I love the idea of warrior, and then you go, well, there's a lot of warriors to choose from, and I don't think we're there yet, and I'd like a lot of warriors to choose from, you
Yeah,
know.
and I think that's really cool too, because they've opened the door to be able to do these like auxiliary products too, where it's like at
Mhm.
any point in time they could throw out a bunch of tokens, right? They're basically worthless. They are zero. Like a Dorinthia token card is 0 cents, like it's free, right? And they could just throw out all these new heroes without affecting the market of anything,
Right.
and that are just different ways to play. I could really see like a like where Crucible of War was an auxiliary product. It wasn't like a set that was meant to be drafted. I could really see, and it had a lot of equipment in it. I could really see an auxiliary product that's meant to just add heroes into the game, where they add, you know, 20, 30 heroes, 2 or 3 for each class, and it just completely opens up the meta, or completely opens up the gameplay.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be really difficult. I think the concern with that is how do you balance it. uh, but if anything, I feel like LSS has done a pretty good job of balancing, other than Ira, has done a pretty good job of balancing. And so I don't know. I think that's cool. I love that idea, and I love that your cards say the same, because I'm like you, man. One of the things that's got me really not loving Magic the Gathering right now is that I didn't like Standard because I didn't want to have to buy a new deck every time.
Yep.
So I went and bought Commander, and now they are making Commander Standard. I mean, it's like
Yep.
ridiculous. In order to keep up with the meta and your friends' decks or whatever, everyone's getting new cards. It's like consistent. Like every new set has 15 new cards for my Commander deck, and it's just
I hate it.
exhausting.
And you know what? The effect it had on me and a lot of other people. And Watsy doesn't realize this because they do not have a good, they think they have a real good ear to the community, and their ear to the community are Walmart surveys and stuff like that, which they have demonstrably like really get things wrong. And I'd like to think I got a pretty good ear to the community, given what I hear from people in our discussions and such. And we've gone from a time where I could not stop building commander decks. I was addicted to, I want to build this commander deck, this commander deck. And because of exactly what you describe, it makes me sell my commander decks, because I just look at my commander deck and I go, I don't want to deal with 15 new cards that are the same 15 cards that everybody at the playgroup has added to their commander decks, because it's just the 15 new cards that came out in the commander precons this year, and I'm not interested. And so it's like, you know what? I'm just going to sell this. And I've been actually like, I have the fewest Magic decks now. I did minimalism, where I once had a wall of Magic decks. And
Yeah.
now it's like, all right, I minimalized down to, these are my modern decks, pauper decks. I've got each one in a little Ultimate Guard Archive commander decks, and it just fits in there. And I just started selling them off. And the number of people who say to me, same thing. I sold off the deck instead of updating it, because I don't want to update Commander. I like
Yeah.
Commander that I've got it in a drawer, and I pull it out of the drawer, and it's like it's a year out of date, and it's fine. And then I get sick of hearing, wow, you're still running Cultivate? It's like, yeah, I'm so, wow, no, they presented, Nissa's Kiss in the new thing. That makes that's outrageous. You're still running Cultivate.
Yeah. So
And
you
it's
gotta get
just
rid of
like,
your
oh,
15 copies of Cultivate and upgrade with
right.
a new card, and it's
Leave me
just
alone.
exhausting. I
Leave
like
me
sleeping my
alone.
decks and not touching them. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
playing them. That's I'm there, man. I think that's I like that fact towards Flesh and Blood. Like I think with Monarch that came out, like there were a few cards that bumped a couple things in Brute. But if you want to keep your just like regular Brute deck without going to Shadow Brute, you still have that. And they added Shadow Brute. If you want something new and spicy, there's something new and spicy, but Brute still remains. And like your warrior deck, like they added a light warrior, right? The talent, but the light warrior cards is a completely different, it's essentially a different class.
Yeah.
And that I like that. I think that's I think again it's another genius thing. And when I read that talent article that James White put out, I mean, I was already hooked on the game. I'm not gonna lie, but that was like, all right, I'm ready to dive in deeper. Like, I'm ready to like
Yeah.
commit my like. It's been thought of. It's been intentionally drafted. This is not just like something that's got the hype going. I already knew that, but that was like for me, it like really solidified that whole thing.
I mean, at what point, when you made the comment about it's just a flash in the pan, or it's just a bubble, it's like, or a fad. How many years before it's not a fad? And
Yeah.
at what point the people saying it's a bubble, like, okay, cool. So it's already been a while now. Like, it's been longer than a lot of these flash in the pan things. Like at 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, at what point is it like, oh snap, it's here to stay?
Yeah.
Is it no longer that? And again, I think they've got some real smart minds over there. And I think also there's the advantage that they're not that behemoth. I get it. It's hard when you're the size of Wizards of the Coast to have that ear to the community and hear literally, James White can get some angry email and just read it himself and, answer it probably. And it's like, you've got that advantage of being more mobile because you're a smaller initial operation, but they really do seem to have some very bright minds over there doing very correct things.
Yeah. So to my patron or my Discord question then,
Yeah.
picking off that, is Magic the Gathering still your favorite trading card game?
Oh yeah, I'm not going to come in here and say Magic's dead to me or anything like that. I love Magic. I can love Magic and not love the current direction of Magic. I can love Magic and not like the decisions that Wizards of the Coast has made recently, by which I mean, let's say, the last 2 years with Magic. I still love Magic. It is still, I like the game system. I am the type of person that when people complain about, like, let's say Mana Screw or variants, I'm like, that's part of the game to me. And I maybe don't like it when it's happening to me, but I think that's a key part of the game. I don't want that refined so that it goes away. That's Magic to me. And I love it. I've been playing it all my life, and that's not going to change. What is going to change is whether or not what currently is happening in Magic is what I like. And I can say that what has been happening in Magic, and I would say 2 years is probably a pretty good time to indicate this period, does not excite me about the game, does not get me interested about the game. It pushes me back towards older ways of playing the game, older formats of playing the game. I never thought that I would start getting interested in old school Magic ever when people first came to me with like old school Magic, if you know what that is. And it's like, I kind of was like, well, I'm glad you guys are having fun, but that's to me really not like, I don't want to be mean about it, but my reaction was like, that's ridiculous. And now I'm like, yeah, sign me up. And I'm like, oh yeah, cool. Sign me up, because this means Wizards of the Coast can never touch and crap all over it. And that we used to say that about Legacy, but now they can screw up Legacy because Legacy is all cards from Standard. Wow, that's exactly why I want to play Legacy, because it's filled with piles of Euro. Yeah. Fantastic. Oko, like that's just what Legacy is, and what attracts us to Legacy is playing Standard cards. Fantastic. Yeah, no, I'll be honest, maybe I'm a curmudgeon. Okay, I'll be honest, I am a curmudgeon. But in addition to that, I just have not enjoyed the direction of Magic in the last couple of years. There have been things that excite me, but a lot more frustrates and disappoints me.
So then how do you think that affects, like, at a local game store, local game scene, which is where you are, your joy and your passion is, if there's not excitement for a new set or the game, and there's not the drive to bring players into the store, there's not the overall feeling of joy in terms of like Standard or whatever, as that diverges and potentially picks up more flesh and blood players, how do you see that adapting if Magic the Gathering can't get its bearings on straight, right? And in my mind, in my opinion, Magic the Gathering, Wizards of the Coast is milking it for all the money as possible, or has
stripping the copper wiring from the walls and saying, look how profitable this is. We should just only sell copper wiring from our walls, and not realizing that as profitable as stripping the copper wiring from your walls is, it's going to run out, and then you're going to have a house that doesn't work. And that's exactly what's happening.
And on top of that, they are taking the profits away from the local game stores. So if I'm a local game store, I want to push a product like Flesh and Blood, where LSS is trying to push into the local game store they provide all this stuff for local game stores to be profitable and to be able to stay afloat. I've talked to local game stores who say, if I only had Magic the Gathering this year, I wouldn't have been able to stay around. It's only because of Flesh and Blood that I was able to stay in business. And I know I'm in the Flesh and Blood world, so like I'm only hearing that from the people who are stocking Flesh and Blood.
I told you about my. Oh, sorry.
No, continue. You told me.
I was just going to say, I told you about my old local game store. It was the place where the owner just played Magic in high school, loved it so much he opened game store. The game store was supposed to be Magic, and that's all he loved. And he had to say, and he said to me in our just having a drink over a beer, he said, I had to make the decision of it's diversify or die because of what Magic is doing to us.
Yeah.
And he's like, I had to go, and in his case, it was Pokemon TCG tournaments where because the players wanted that competitive show up with a deck and play in a Friday Night Magic like thing. And he's like, we started getting Pokemon tournaments going and they were a big hit. And people bought sleeves and people bought sodas and stuff like that. And that's exactly what's going to happen. And Flesh and Blood doing all of that stuff is another thing that attracts me to the company. They realize how important investing in the local game store is.
Right.
Magic is walking away from that. Magic says we're happy being on Amazon and at Walmart. Walmart. Oops. Well, then things can happen there. Oopsie. Yeah.
So what happens then as an LGS? At what point do LGSs? By what point do they move past just diversifying and say, okay, I'm going to stock the product, but my focal point, my focus of my company, my focus of my local game store is going to be to push the product that allows me to stay afloat and to grow as a business. And maybe I'm giving LGSs too much business knowledge and business sense, but but like at what point do they say, okay, I'm going to make, I know people who are saying we're going to drop Friday Night Magic and do Flesh and Blood.
Yeah, that's great.
What does that mean? What does that mean for that history of a card game like Flesh and Blood, like Magic the Gathering? And do you think the tides will turn? I know financially the tides will never turn. I know always, I think Magic the Gathering will be the behemoth. But as a player,
things go round and round. The tides do turn. Yeah. The most ignorant thing, as we all know, looking at the last 10 years of the economy, bubbles burst.
Yeah.
So it will not always be. I disagree with that. And things go round and round. I think they walked away from, they dominated. There was no chance. Nobody, not even Hearthstone. They tried, like with their own card game. And it's like, you could not beat Magic the Gathering for local game store play space, for competitive, what they were doing with GPs. They walked away from all of it before the pandemic. That time, you're asking when? That time already occurred, and it was before the pandemic, and it was when Wizards of the Coast decided to walk away from the local game store and to walk away from GPs. That's also when I set my thing of my little 2-year period. They said, "This we don't need it. We don't need it." And other play that still exists. That desire for that still exists. Pokemon literally made a conscious decision based off of Wizards of the Coast walking away, and they said we should be having more Pokemon events. We should be having the equivalent of Pokemon GP. I mean, they already did, but more so. That should be bigger part of this. And their move, they and if it hadn't been for COVID, you would have really seen, from what I've heard, ear to the ground about what they've been doing behind the scenes. They were really planning to say, "Cool, WotC isn't interested in a GP every weekend as a big spectacle event. We're going to really amp up what Pokemon brings to the table with that." Flesh and Blood is absolutely eyeballing money that Wizards of the Coast left on the table, and they go, we walked away from that. We picked up our toys and went over to Amazon. All right, well, someone else will take it over. I think that that point has happened, and I think that as we now exit a lot of, I know New Zealand obviously was just, boy, what great coincidence in terms of them being like the world leaders in terms of safe reopenings and stuff, but the rest of the world is starting to catch up. And Wizards of the Coast made their announcement that they're no longer restricting in-store play, that its local rules and laws will open it up for Friday Night Magics if it's safe in your area. And as that happens, stores are going to find, people are not going to be showing up to Magic because WotC has walked away from supporting it in that way like they used to. And like my own old local game store found out, Pokemon packs them in. Flesh and Blood packs them in. This other new game maybe pops up, going to pack them in. X-Wing packs them in. There you go. We don't need it. It's not doing what it used to do. And then those effects, I feel, will be felt in Magic, because I honestly believe, people say I don't know the first thing about business, and they're right, but also I do still firmly believe that Friday Night Magic and the local game store investment is tied to the reason why Secret Layers sell so well as they do now. And that when you cut that off, it's like stepping on a dinosaur's tail. It's taking a minute, but eventually people are going to be like, well, why am I buying these cards if I don't have anywhere to play them? And it was this ecosystem. The mosquito is why we have a hawk, because the frog eats the mosquito, and the rat eats the frog, and the hawk eats the rat, and then the hawk is thriving. I know that's not the real thing, but you get them. You know what I'm saying.
I get.
So Wizards is like, damn, we don't need these little mosquito local game stores. Get rid of the mosquitoes. We got our hawk. And
I'm
then
sure
suddenly it's like,
will let us know how to actually.
Oh, they'll be like, I can tell the prof was an English major. You get the idea.
Yeah,
it's all connected. Yeah. It's all connected, baby.
And I think what you, going back to what you said at the beginning of like, where does your joy come from? And I think you are the average person too. Like, our joy doesn't come from the card game. Right. Our joy comes from the person we're sitting across from playing the card game. And it's that interaction, it's that smile, it's that little, like, my friends used to always hate me because I would like do something in Magic, and then I I give them this little grin, and it's like, I've got it. And it's that interaction and that friendship that matters. And in my mind, it's like whatever brings that friendship together is what's going to propel a card game, or whatever. And I feel like Magic the Gathering has lost the card game sense, and they become this IP. They're doing Netflix, they're doing Secret Layers, they're doing shoes, they're doing this, they're doing that, and and they've lost the idea. And what I love about Flesh and Blood is, like, they don't need to be that. They don't need to be a million, billion, quadrillion dollar company. They just need to have a really good card game. And their card game is based around meeting together in the flesh and blood, because they identify that is why it's important. It's important to be sitting across from your friend, or maybe, like, I love the local game store because I'm a big personality. I think I'm a friendly guy. I try to be kind to the people around me. And like, I love the idea of going to a local game store, and card games draw a lot of people who don't have a lot of friendships and a lot of friends, and they draw and it's an opportunity for me to go and to meet somebody and to bring joy to their life and to enlighten their life and make them smile a little bit. And one of my things I always say, do you want to cut my deck? And I let them cut my deck, and they asked if I want to cut theirs. I'm like, no, man. Like, if you want to cheat, if you need this win more than I do, then go ahead and cheat. I don't care. Like, go ahead and cheat.
Right.
It is what it is. Like, this is about the friendship and about the community. And man, I just feel like that's what Flesh and Blood has going to it. And I think we see that even online. We see that in stuff. And man, that's what brings me joy too. So I love that you had mentioned that.
And never underestimate how successful it will be when you have a community that wants to fight for the success of your business. Yes. And nobody's fighting for Wizards of the Coast to succeed anymore. But there was a time where 10 years ago, people would be doing that. We got to get people into Friday Night Magic. We got to get people playing. Like I even described, I wanted to play so badly, I built extra decks so that people would have those decks. Nobody doing that. Nobody, like this company has the worst public relations currently with their customer base, and they don't think it matters that they have the worst public relations with their customer base. And they're going to find out how much that matters when everybody is passionately getting that customer base to see how cool Flesh and Blood is. Certainly. Yeah, absolutely. It's great. It's just great.
I love it. Well, we got I think 10 minutes left that I had planned for this. Do you want to just do like some steamrolling through some questions from the Flesh and Blood community? I've got
lightning round. I'll try and be succinct.
Yeah. So, can LSS handle the growth rate of FAB? And this was your kind of question, but what do you think? Give it a
so
rate.
Far, so good. So far, so good. The biggest thing I point to is that announcement about the Blitz decks. I believe, again, from my uneducated, no business training standpoint, I think the Blitz decks are really critical. And I really feel that if it ends up where, like, when my Is It Worth It to Buy, spoiler, yes, the Blitz decks video comes out and the comments are filled with, these are $75 everywhere, that's going to be, can't handle something. And I think they're working hard to make sure that that isn't the case. And I believe so far I'm seeing every sign is a smart choice. I think they're well equipped for it.
And we're going to do a video series on my channel. I don't know if you're going to be doing gameplay. Are you doing gameplay with the Blitz decks?
I usually do. I'm not in. I don't have a good setup for gameplay. I've never really done much Magic. I don't think I've really done any Magic gameplay on the main channel. Yeah, much more of a, like, obviously, let's sit down and I'm going to run my mouth, about pontificating about these things.
So we're going to do a series that's going to launch this weekend of how to play each one of the Blitz decks. So that'll be kind of cool to see those two things out together. All right, Flesh and Blood in 5 years. What's it look like? And what are your plans as the professor at Tolarian Community College for content on Flesh and Blood? I don't know if you're allowed to answer that one or not, but that's the question.
No, my boss is me, so I can say whatever I want. My plan currently is I want to do some intermittent Flesh and Blood videos. I'm not like switching over to just Flesh and Blood content, but in the same way that I did Pokemon stuff where I liked to have an Is It Worth It for most of the products that Pokemon made for a while. And I kind of, fell out of interest with that. I'm interested in doing that with Flesh and Blood as they begin to do this. So if they continue with bringing out new sort of, pre-constructed products over the next couple of years, I currently plan to look at them and talk about them. And then from there, I'm going to see how it goes. Obviously, if my audience is not as interested in the content, I will probably be a little less interested myself. If my audience is more interested in the content, then I will be more interested myself. So I would say intermittent would be how I would classify my relationship with Flesh and Blood going forward, and open-minded.
Okay, so everyone right now, I need you to stop watching this video. Go to the professor's, Tolarian Community College YouTube channel. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you're commenting on all of his Flesh and Blood videos and showing him that you're interested. All right, so what do you think in 5 years, Flesh and Blood? I mean, you think this is? I mean, what's your prediction? Give it a shot.
I think 5 years, Flesh and Blood. I liked what you said about I'm gonna be optimistic. I'm usually the pessimist, but I'll be optimistic, and I'll say optimistically, your dream scenario that you described earlier is going to be what gets it. The fact that in 5 years you can still buy Unlimited at or near the price you can buy it at now. They're going to pull it off. It's going to be revolutionary, and as a result of that, that's going to be something that really brings a lot of people over.
Love it. All right. Will you bling out your deck with cold foils, or will you go with budget?
I will probably go with budget. I'm not that big on cold foils personally. My favorite thing, because I like to sit down and play, I said this in before, is I love getting, maybe I'll bling out fully, things like my hero cards. What I like is I like the double-sided with young and old on the same card. I like that. I like going, oh, did you want to get classic constructed or blitz? And so that's my goal, is for each of my decks to have that set up. So I'm going to say focused bling, maybe also bling is fun on weapons and equipment for me, because obviously you set that up at the start of game. And I would say that stuff that's in the deck itself, that's fine. Just it's going to get shuffled 100%. and manhandled and everything. 100% so that's focused bling.
I was actually confused at why they put cold foils in as instants in Monarch. I did not like that. That did not sit well with me. It's like, why? I don't want a cold foil in my deck. That's like the first time.
Yeah.
What's your favorite hero, sir, currently?
I mean, I obviously have to say Prism, just because that's what you can play my preview card with. Yeah. So it's a bias. It's like, listen, I'm not gonna lie. They gave me a really cool preview card, the Librarian, and in order to play the Librarian, I have to play Prism. So there you go.
Super cool. And the library, I think the library looks way better in rainbow foil than cold foil. So, and I also have not pulled the library yet in my
Yeah.
boxes. So I pulled one on stream the other night for the people who donated to our charity thing. We raised $38,000 for charity.
Wow.
And the people who donated, we did a case break for them, and I pulled a library for the person who donated the most money, which it was like random. The person who donated the most money happened to randomly roll the slot that the library was in, and then we pulled the it was an amazing story. It's great.
Very nice.
Yeah. All right. Can too much flipping or hype ruin a game like Flesh and Blood? And how does high financial values affect the actual game? You have 30 seconds to answer that question.
Yes, it can. And the big problem with this, as I said, is that you can't have too much in one area. It can't all just be about cheap cards that are fun to play, and it can't all just be about finance. It has to find that happy balance. And hopefully the investors, who obviously have invested quite a lot in this game, recognize that a big part of what is going to bring value to their cards is a healthy player base of people that aren't interested in the finance but enjoy it on a casual level. Everybody likes to crack open a booster pack and get a card that's worth more than the booster pack. You shouldn't expect it every time, but it's a big rush, it's a big thrill, and you like to have that feeling. Yeah. Your cards do need value, but it can't be out of control. And I said it, I don't want to be a broken record, but I think the key is you can't buy out the blitz decks. You need the entry point. And as long as the entry point is there, that allows you to say you must have a counter argument to the prospective player or the existing player that says, you have to be a millionaire to play this game. You must have the counter argument of, what are you talking about? Blitz decks are $10. And that you must have that. And if you have that, you're winning. If you don't have that, and it's like, well, maybe you can do this and that, and you'll work your way to having a deck one day. No, you've lost them. Yeah. So yes, it's a healthy balance, and we must recognize that. So for God's sakes, everybody who's an investor, leave the blitz decks alone and go nuts on unlimited. Everything else. Yeah, leave
unlimited alone too.
Leave unlimited alone, but leave. Oh God, everything. I've put all my roulette money. I put everything on blitz deck. It's like put it all on blitz deck. I believe in them so passionately, and my God, if they're $100 a pop in a week, I'm gonna lose it. I'm gonna lose it.
All right. Does the 16+ nature of the artwork help or hurt Flesh and Blood?
It's tricky. Listen, I'll tell you a story. My son, I've got a son. He's 7 years old. When he was 6, obviously, like kids do, he sees Magic as a big part of my life. He wanted to learn how to play, and he wanted me to get him Magic booster packs. And I did not think about it because I thought Magic, no problem, right? Now, Magic is actually, what does it say, 12+, 13+ on the pack? I thought Magic, it's all kitty glove stuff. That is not true. I've been desensitized. I give him some Magic packs, and I'll never forget it. My 6-year-old kid is going through cards, and then all of a sudden he stops and his hand starts shaking, and this look that is like a dagger in my own heart of like on him, and he's kind of with a thing in his voice, "Daddy, take this away," and he couldn't move. And it was a card, it was a black card where someone was slitting their throat or something, and blood was coming down, and it was like, I don't remember the card, but some of those black cards are pretty gory. They might not have sexually explicit stuff on Magic cards, but damn, they've got knives going into people. And he had never seen, he's watching bloody, like a Word Girl on PBS Kids at this point, and everything, and he's got this knife in a guy's throat, and he flipped out, and I was like, wow, well, we're sticking to Pokemon for you because there's no dissected Pikachu in Pokemon. Right. 16+, so it's a little bit more. I'll tell you the truth, he got into Flesh and Blood, and we looked through it. He goes, "Is this okay for me?" And my wife and I, he saw us playing it like crazy as we were getting into it, and we looked at each other and we're like, is it okay for him? Because as an adult, you go, "Oh, that's fine." And it's like, "Oh, wait, no, that's not." And we looked through it. There's a couple cards, and what we were handing him, it was like, okay, that one, someone's getting smashed up pretty bad. That one's, there's a little blood. I didn't really think it was even, some of that Magic stuff is detailed gore. Yeah. Some of that Magic stuff is pretty gory. I think it's a balance, 16+. I don't know. I'm gonna waffle on that one and say, I don't know. Kids can play it. Kids are good source to get into. You want to have some mature stuff. Just don't go overboard with let's not do some of that terrible terrible, like, bad anime level,
Yeah, I agree.
gross art sort of thing. And I don't mind
I know people who
little,
are even like not offended, but they're like, I don't even really like the tunic artwork, the spring tunic, where it's just like the ladies. I mean, it's her. The highlight is the tunic, and it's not like the anime
yeah.
stuff. But they're like, I don't even like that. I was like, I didn't even notice that. Like, I didn't even.
Uh,
I saw the tunic. I didn't see the breast or whatever. But
I
like,
don't think they've done anything over the top so
no,
far, and that's, I guess, one of the things. Like, don't lean in. You don't want to lean into to that, or lean out of it. Just focus on making good art, and leave it at that, and don't start being like, hey, sex sells, or hey, going against sex. Like, just fucking leave it at the door, and just some good art. And I don't know, I didn't have any. I had more trouble with my kid playing Magic than Flesh and Blood as far as artwork is concerned. Is all I got to say. It's anecdotal, but I didn't have to take any Flesh and Blood cards away from his hand, where he was literally trembling, as I did a Magic card where someone was slitting their throat, which is pretty bad. I'd rather him see boobs than someone slitting their throat, to be honest with you. As a father.
Well, speaking of artwork and Pokemon, if MetaZoo would create a professor humanoid beastie, what would its fourth wall effect be? Do you know? Are you familiar at all with MetaZoo? I don't even know what that question means.
I'm learning MetaZoo. I would say have a drink.
Have a drink. Ooh, so anytime you're having a drink, you get to do an effect. That's cool.
And I did not specify the drink, because I love my coffee and I love my not coffee.
The fourth wall effect in MetaZoo is the drink. I like that.
Pour a good, or rather, pour a good drink, as long as it's good.
There you
Whatever
go.
that means to you, as long as it's a good one.
All right, and then I'm really interested in this last question. I think you've already given LSS a grade. You've said they're doing really good. You're worried about them. So one of the questions was, what would you grade? I think you give them an A. Okay. Here's the question I really like. This was my favorite of all the questions. Flesh and Blood is still young, and there's incredible design space. And you, Professor, have a history of board game and Magic the Gathering and other things. What is one type of mechanic that you would like to see implemented in Flesh and Blood, because it's so early and it's able to add interesting mechanics and such? What's one type of mechanic that you'd love to see added into a game like Flesh and Blood?
They just added it, and it was I think mentors are brilliant. I think that this is, Flesh and Blood, I'll tell you what I don't want to see implemented is I don't want to ever see multiple heroes, that sort of thing. I don't think that that's something that is attractive to me. I really think that the idea of our singular hero going to battle is what we're doing with this game. But I think that what they did with mentors is they figured out a way to have some other characters present in a way that doesn't shatter that idea.
Planeswalkers.
Right. No. Those are not. I saw some people saying mentors are planeswalkers for Flesh and Blood. I disagree with that. But that's what I'd say. I think it was a clever way. I like the way it uses the arsenal, in all honesty. I think it's new design space with the arsenal. And I really am excited to see if this continues in other sets, or if that's just going to be unique to Monarch.
Awesome. I love it. Well, man, that was a lot of fun, and I can't thank you enough. I know I'm like broken record, but I can't thank you enough for being on the channel, and I'm sure the community really appreciates it, and I'm sure that they're looking forward to hearing more about Flesh and Blood from the professor at Tolarian Community College. And dude, this was an honor for me to be a part of, and it was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure, and I really appreciate you and the community as well. And I guess that's one thing we didn't talk about, which is the community. And that's what it's about. It's the people you play the games with. And I know all communities are diverse in terms of the ratio of jerk to non-jerk, but I've definitely found Flesh and Blood to be very heavy in the non-jerk area. Everyone's very welcoming and patient and kind, and that's both people who are looking at the game more from an investment standpoint versus a gameplay standpoint. And I find in both of those two ends of the spectrum, everyone just seems like a lot of really cool people. I've enjoyed all the random games I've gotten, all the creators such as yourself that I've met, and all the people commenting and talking to me. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm so happy to be here. And thank you for having me.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks a lot. And everyone go and make sure you're commenting on all of Brian's Flesh and Blood videos and all the, and make sure we're sharing love over there to make sure that he understands that we value him as a content creator in our community too. So
Cheers, my
Brian,
friend.
have a great day, man. I really appreciate you.
Appreciate you as well.